Now, Christopher Columbus, his name wasn't actually Columbus, his name was Colon. Why did they call him Columbus? Because in the various, not just religious, but other historical texts, you see the codes and the code names that the initiates would understand that the general population do not. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the symbol for Nimrod was the fish and the symbol for Queen Semiramis was the dove. Columbus means dove. In French today, colombe actually still means dove. And the Romans in the Roman Empire worshipped a deity called Venus Columba, Venus the dove. Both Venus and the dove were symbols of Queen Semiramis, this deity. So that's where he got his name, Columbus. But there's more actually to look at in terms of this. Because 4 or 5 years after Columbus found that part of the Americas, down the Caribbean, etc., another guy left Bristol, England. And Bristol comes from Barati, that's where the name evolved from, the Phoenician deity. His name was John Cabot, and he discovered what we now call North America. Conventional history has not put Columbus and Cabot together, but you can do, not least through the research of a Freemasonic historian of great reputation called Manly P. Hall, who points out that Columbus and Cabot both operated in Genoa at the same time, and both were connected to the same secret society network. And within a few years, 4 or 5 years of each other, one finds one part of the Americas, the other finds another part of the Americas. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. What was actually happening was the time scale had come to take over America, and it moved on after that. So Columbus was a front man and a knowing one. There's one other group that came out of this Near East which it is vital to talk about. And it relates actually to Columbus too. We've seen how one group of peoples moved by land across from that Caucasus, Turkey, Iran area and across to become the white races of Europe. We've seen how the Phoenicians went to Britain much earlier than that, 3000 BC. But there was another group which came out of the Middle Near East and parked themselves in Venice in northern Italy. And these Phoenicians became the Venetians. And they created a maritime, because they were a maritime nation, the Phoenicians, and financial empire out of Venice. And that financial empire was based on lending people money that didn't exist and charging interest on it and funding both sides in wars. Now, within these white Phoenician bloodlines, yet again, were these reptilian bloodlines, these Anunnaki bloodlines. And again, you'll have to refer to The Biggest Secret to see the enormous evidence that this stuff about the Anunnaki and the reptilians is correct. While they were in Venice, this group of Phoenicians Anunnaki became known as the Black Nobility because they started creating titles for themselves and taking over titles that already existed. And they got this nickname, the Black Nobility. Now, some of the so-called Jewish banking names of the world today, like the Warburgs, not actually Jewish at all, because they came out of this group in Venice. The Warburgs, who were fundamental in creating the Federal Reserve, the so-called Central Bank of America, which is privately owned from people in Europe, the Warburgs were called the Abraham del Banco family in Venice, and they became the Warburgs when they moved up into Germany and Europe. So eventually, this black nobility in Venice moved north through Germany and centered themselves in Amsterdam. In 1688, one of this black nobility called William of Orange was manipulated onto the throne of England as William III. With that, this whole shebang moved across and created its epicenter in London. So at that point, those bloodlines that had gone much earlier through the Phoenicians into Britain and those that had come cross land and also through Venice actually came together in London. It was William of Orange, a few years after he became king, who signed the charter that created the Bank of England, and the central banking system was created. It was after that time that the City of London financial district became the center of global finance, And it was after that time that we got the Great British Empire, when these bloodlines were expanded from Britain all over the world, to Africa, to Australia, to Asia, to the Americas. And what started out in Babylon and the Near East and moved outwards now went global because of the British Empire. People say that because the British Empire and these European empires have actually contracted since then, that it can't be true that the world's still controlled from London and these cities. But there's two ways of controlling people. One has a finite life, one can go on forever until someone exposes it. The first one is overt, in-your-face control, the dictatorship, where Britain controls this country and controls that country. The people in that country know where they are. They're controlled by an outside force, like the Russians during communism and the Germans during Hitler. That has a finite life because eventually, when you know where you stand, you're going to rebel against that control. Much more subtle to replace that overt control with covert control, where people are controlled, but they don't know that they're controlled. People don't rebel about the fact that they're not free if they think they are. So what happened as the contraction came of these empires, not least the British Empire, is while on the surface it seemed to be over, left outside in those countries, back in those countries, were the bloodlines and the secret society network, which has continued to control those countries from this point on. Because what happened in that ancient time is that you had the positive use of knowledge, and they created mystery schools and secret societies in Egypt and elsewhere to pass this advanced knowledge on in a positive way. You then had this other force, largely out of Babylon, that also created mystery schools and secret societies for very different reasons, to pass on the advanced knowledge only to the chosen ones that they chose. And they created the institutions, these same secret societies, in the public arena that sucked that advanced knowledge out of circulation. Not least the Inquisition. When, 2 minutes into this video, I would have signed a suicide note during the Inquisition. So therefore, you had a situation in which the knowledge was passed on to the few, and the institutions created by that secret society network to suck it out of public circulation. Eventually, and people like Manly P. Hall have documented this, that negative use of knowledge, that negative structure of mystery schools and secret societies also infiltrated eventually and took over the positive mystery schools and secret societies. So we reached a point eventually where knowledge was passed on only to the few at the highest level who had a malevolent intent, and it was sucked out of the public arena big time. So the structure today is basically this. The epicenter on operational level is in London. That's where the global agenda is decided. And in these different countries, like America, the United States, South Africa, etc., you have bloodline branch managers, as I call them, who run those particular countries in line with a centrally decided and coordinated agenda. In South Africa, you've got the Oppenheimer family, who are the bloodline controllers of South Africa before and after Mandela. Control the stock market, the diamond mines, and the gold mines and the other industries and the media. In America, the bloodline branch managers are the Rockefellers and the cartel of the Eastern establishment, who get their orders from the centrally coordinated epicenter in London and Paris, particularly London, and they run America in line with that. So wherever I go, in the 20-odd countries I've talked in and researched in so far, the same policies, the same structures exist because they're coming from a central point. And the world is controlled, therefore, by a very, very few people. One of the bloodlines centered in London are the Windsors. In The Biggest Secret, I expose some stunning, breathtaking information about the real nature of the Windsors and the bloodlines. These are black nobility bloodlines who go back through this story that I've been talking about, and that's why they have so much power and so much wealth and so much influence, because they're meant to, but not for long. Now this is Ben. Everyone knows that the founding fathers believed in freedom in America. Well, some of them might have done, but some of them didn't. Because what happened in 1776 and afterwards, when America to this day believed it was becoming an independent nation and free, what happened was that overt control of the Americas through the colonies was replaced by covert control. America has never been free of Britain's influence and control to this very day, and it's about time it was. And people like Benjamin Franklin, and I document this in detail in The Biggest Secret, were agents of British intelligence and the British Crown. This guy was parked in Paris as an ambassador in Paris, and he spent tremendous amounts of time in London. More than that, I said earlier that one of the common themes of these bloodlines through history is blood drinking, satanic ceremonies, etc., human sacrifice. That's what this guy was into. He was one of the top Freemasons in America. He was a member of key Freemasonic lodges in France, which created the French Revolution, like the Nine Sisters Lodge. And he was a member of a really elite secret society and satanic human sacrificing, blood drinking operation in Britain called the Hellfire Club, run by a British government minister called Sir Francis Dashwood, and who built underground chambers in his estate at Wickham, north of London, to do the sacrificing and stuff. That may sound amazing, but just a little while ago in the British newspapers, this story broke. Again, while Benjamin Franklin was fighting for freedom for the American colonies, he parked his bum in London. And he lived in a place called 36 Craven Street near Trafalgar Square. Well, they've just been renovating that to turn it into a Benjamin Franklin museum. And bingo, they found 10 bodies underneath the floor, 6 of them children, and they've dated them to the time Benjamin Franklin lived there. They've said, oh, he must have been into body snatching. When you link it to his other activities, I think there's probably another explanation.